So, still in the Sermon on the Mount, still looking at this incredibly famous teaching that Jesus does, and he kind of shifts focus now a little bit onto generosity, prayer, and fasting. We've already had a whole bunch read to us, thanks Kev, so we're just going to sort of dig in and dive in and have a look at this. I want to clear a couple of things up though, right at the start, or rather pick a few things out right at the start. Because I think actually we've been taught a whole bunch of stuff around these passages, but I think actually Jesus comes at it from a different angle because of the distance between then and now, and the way that we use words. So let's discuss three matters and get them out of the way. The first is a note on hypocrites, or hypocritus is in the Greek-ish. It's in ish because it's me who's pronouncing it. The term hypocritus simply means actor in Greek. Whereas today, when if we say someone is a hypocrite, what do we think? If you was to call someone hypocritical, what would you be implying? Don't practice what they preach. They say one thing and do the other. That's how we would understand it, but that's not what hypocritus means for Jesus. Hypocrite isn't about living out our words. It's about being an actor. And you can say one thing and do it, but if it's just for show, you are a hypocrite. Or rather, you are an actor, you are a hypocritus. And this is often missed today when discussing hypocrisy. So, out of interest, who does Jesus critique most regularly in the Gospels for being hypocrites? The Pharisees, absolutely. And we kind of go, oh yeah, the Pharisees, they totally, absolutely. They said one thing and did totally the other. But actually, they didn't. They were people of the book. They were devoted to their beliefs. They lived it out to the absolute degree of how they understood the word of God, and they were incredibly committed to their teachings. The issue wasn't inconsistency of doing one thing and doing the other. The issue was actually that, as Jesus said to them, he says, your religious piety is largely a show. It's not changing your heart. It's not leading you to generosity and compassion. That's the core problem. And when reading the Gospels, we must grasp Jesus' point about hypocrites without letting Western assumptions cloud our understanding. He critiques not just the discrepancy between word and actions, but also between actions and our hearts. See, Jesus argues that the issue is the performative nature of behavior, not merely the accuracy of what one says or does. It's the underlying reasons for those actions that Jesus is going after. And it's important to realize we can say one thing, act differently, and still not actually be a hypocrite, according to the Gospels. Because it's not about, saying, if I said to Margaret, oh, Margaret, don't worry, I'll plan all of next Messy Church, and then forgot or didn't do it or stuff like that, it wouldn't necessarily make me a hypocrite. But what might do is if I went, don't worry, Margaret, I'm going to do all of Messy Church next time, and I did it, and I went, aren't I amazing because I've done all of these, and this is how you really do a craft, and blah 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 blah, and it was just all about me. Then that makes me a hypocritus. That makes me an actor, because actually the motive behind doing it is to attain glory for myself rather than anything else. See, Jesus continues from the previous studies that we've done. He continues this flow of teaching. And really what he's doing is he's taken all of this, you've heard it said stuff, but I say unto you statements, and he shows how to live it out. And Jesus is shifting towards demonstrating what this newness is all about. See, the first half of the Sermon on the Mount focuses on interpreting the law. It's where we get the Beatitudes. It's all of this stuff. It's about this is how you interpret it. And therefore, if you remember what we said about interpretation, isn't just a head knowledge thing. It's how it's worked out, how you live your life. And he emphasizes that he hasn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, and repeating time and time again, you've heard it said, but I say unto you, that shmika, that wisdom, that authority that we talked about. And the second half addresses how to live it out. It's practical steps, time and time again. So in Matthew 6, Jesus shifts his focus to how we pray, how we give, and how we fast, declaring when you give, it looks like this. And this raises a note on hypocrisy and reward, and Jesus highlights that following the example of the hypocrites, meaning that they receive their reward. Actors receive their reward. Is that a present or future tense, do you think? When he's talking about an actor, it's present, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. If you do these things just to be seen by other people, Jesus says that's your reward. You'll get your applause. I have a number of guilty pleasures in my life, usually around TV. And this is going to sound like a confession, isn't it? But it's not. It's like one of the things I enjoy watching is like shows like Aussie Gold Hunters and opal mining stuff, because it's just totally different. And it's reality TV, really, so it's trash, it's rubbish. But it's just a totally different way of living, and I'm kind of fascinated by these people who spend their lives looking for treasure, essentially, and kind of like what it does to them and all that sort of thing. But another part of my sort of guilty pleasures is I really like WWE wrestling. I think it comes back to being a kid. But that is all, they're athletes, they are absolute athletes, but it's all for show. And I was watching this thing the other day about the return of this character called Edge. And it was a number of years ago that he was coming back, having spent about 7 or 8 years outside of the WWE. He had fallen out with the owner and all that sort of stuff. And he was coming back at this event called the Royal Rumble, which is this like massive 30-man kind of like thing where you have to throw somebody over the top of ropes and all that sort of stuff. And he was talking about how like he had to come in secretly, and he had to come in and it was like trying to keep it a secret away from the crowd, so that when his entrance music came on, it kind of like exploded, and it did. You know, you saw this like reaction, like, oh, it's Ed, because he was a fan favorite and all that sort of thing. And he was talking about this experience, and he was talking about the bump that the crowd gets. And that's the way that he talks about it. When he hears that entrance music, and it's like that bump of excitement, and he says, but actually, you come out on stage and you get this bump, and it's like, that's what we live for. And I thought, gosh, how sad. How sad. This is the reward that Jesus is talking about. That's that instant gratification. Now, you know, like, it's a massive bump when you're in a stadium full of, like, I don't know, 30,000 people watching you, and you get this, you know, your theme music comes on. But anyway, Jesus deals with this in a moment. I should have probably saved that example for later on, but there we are. He says, you know, these are the things, this is what you'll get. You'll just get the celebration, the visibility from the audience, from people, and it's a very immediate reward. And when Jesus speaks of doing it so that your Father sees you, the assumption might be that the reward is simply future-orientated. You do these things, and you will eventually get a reward when you die and go to heaven. The thing is, I don't think that's the logical conclusion of what Jesus is teaching here. The way that he talks about this is that your reward could either be future or present. And I think what we've been taught is that it's just all future. Isn't it? Like, eventually you'll get your reward. But I think Jesus actually teaches that your reward is both future and present. Your reward is now. And so this isn't simply about putting another jewel in your crown for heaven. If you choose to act right and choose to act authentically and not show off, your reward is delayed. It's delayed gratification. But really, there is this true and present reward that we receive from God. We'll unpack this in a little bit. We'll unpack it now, but so just bear with me, because it's like, okay, what is this reward? How is this different? How is this changing? Doing something in secret changes who we are. I think we can all experience that and all know that, don't we? When we do something in secret, we are changed. And this is what Jesus talks about on the Sermon on the Mount. Now, in English, we use the word will because it implies a casual relationship. If this, then that will happen. If you do this, then that will happen. And we're very limited. It's a bit like, we're English language, it's complicated in some ways because you've got so many words that are spelt the same but mean incredibly different things. Or we've got, 3 different ways of talking about there. And so to learn it as a foreigner is very hard, because you can, especially if you're seeing written language, it's really difficult to know. Greek offers more future tense options, and it encompasses actions occurring now, ongoing, and extending indefinitely. And that's what it's doing. It's using a word that encompasses occurring now, ongoing, and extending indefinitely tense about the reward we will receive. English restricts us. The Greek actually does a way better job for us. And readers often interpret it solely as a future context of receiving something. But I think, and I would contend, that in the context of Jesus' teachings, the will signifies not just future events, but an experience resulting from certain actions that we receive now. The hypocrites have received their reward. What they have in the present is already the fulfillment of that reward. They get their applause. They get their bump, so to speak. That's the end of it. Whereas when you give to the needy, or whatever you do, your Father sees you and will reward you, both now and in the future. That now is the transformation that happens. Who here wants to grow more like Jesus? Yeah, all of us, I would hope. And we know, we kind of go like, redemption is is an instantaneous thing, but sanctification is a lifelong process. It is, absolutely. But that sanctification, that constant change, is part of your reward. We grow to become more like Jesus. It represents a future reward, but it's a now impact. I am changed. And that change resonates because you'll never be the same. It's that whole analogy of, you throw a rock into a pool and it ripples outward. Well, where's the biggest ripple? Right where you've thrown the stone. The more I'm transformed, the more I'm made new. And this present is a significant reward now and for the future. It's a bit like compound interest on savings. You've got to make the deposit straight away. For there to be any, if you haven't got any savings, you can have an account that's got, 2 billion% interest. But if you don't put something into it, you're not getting. 2 billion% of 0 is what? Mathematics genius sat at the back? 0. Even I know that. It's But once that deposit's made, that change comes. It is an instant thing, and it has future implications, because once we're changed, we remain changed. So talking about secrecy stuff, all three of these teachings that Jesus unpacks, generosity, prayer, fasting, include this element of secrecy. And many wish to focus on this aspect. I've heard loads of teaching on it. I've probably taught on it myself, and as I've studied this way of engaging with the text, there's loads of things I wish, I think we did something on at the Shape course on Wednesday night, and kind of like the opening icebreaker question thing was if one wish could be fulfilled that gave you like a significant power, what would it be? And I was like, oh, actually, I quite like to be like super strong, because that's yeah. But actually thinking about it now, I wish I'd sort of said, actually, I wish I could time travel. Because there's so much I would go back in my own life. Never mind going back and going like hanging out with Jesus. That would be cool. But going back to in my own life and going like, oh, you don't want to do that, mate. You don't want to say that. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do, I'd love to be able to sort of like do that. And there's loads I'd take back. So many have focused on this idea that we're to not let our right hand know what our left hand is doing, to pray in secret, to go into our closet, and when fasting, don't appear somber as Hippocrates do. And all these actions are performed by actors. That's what Jesus is kind of like showing the difference. He's saying, actors do this. Don't be like an actor. Do this instead. Don't announce it with trumpets. Don't have your fanfare welcome, your entrance music. And the idea originated from theatres where the famous actor or actress in town would turn up, and audiences would go and see that person in the same way as what we would do. If you remember a number of years ago, Johnny Depp randomly rocked up into Gateshead and Newcastle, because he was with John Beck. Yeah, he was on and trying to stay away from media stuff, because there was a big trial going on, if you can remember. And he went. They'd obviously done their sound checks and stuff like that at the Glass House. I mean, they decided to go to the bar, and it got out. Rumour got out, and this Riverside bar got overwhelmed and swamped by people who were like, I must go see Johnny Depp and stuff. And when you saw it on social media, it was crazy, absolutely crazy. And if Bono turned up here, to worship one day, and people came, they heard, and maybe he was like, oh, Rob, it's all right, mate, I'll play, I'll lead worship today. I think we would all go like, yeah, no worries, mate. And because that fame draws people, so it's something that we can do. Now, back then, they didn't have high-def TV. They didn't have, they weren't able to project it onto social media and all that sort of thing. So and often actors would wear costumes and masks, and making it hard for them to be recognised. And so you'd rock up to his place, and you'd wonder, you'd think, who on earth, I've come to see, whatever, Sanctifolius or whatever, I don't know. And when finally they appeared on stage, an obtrusive trumpet blasts would signal their arrival, so that people would know that the famous person is on stage. And it says, when you give to the needy, don't announce it with trumpets or act like the theatre performers. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't pray on street corners like actors do. When you fast, don't make your face look somber. Don't put on a mask. Don't exaggerate your expressions with makeup. And this was all meant to be seen from a distance in the theatre. And all these references are cloaked in theatre and drama language. And this drives this issue. But when Jesus discusses secrecy, We become overly concerned that everything must be done in secret. But Jesus isn't addressing secrecy, but motivation. And we know this because at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, he teaches about the light of the world and the city on the hill. And eventually he says, let your light shine. Can we finish it? Let your light shine before men. Yeah. Let your light shine before men so they can see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Absolutely. Jesus began the sermon emphasizing that deeds should be visible. Throughout the New Testament, Paul says, follow me as I follow Jesus. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. Our walk with Jesus should be public and observable. Jesus is not saying to hide your actions. Rather, he addresses our motivations. If you do things for attention, avoid being showy don't do things for attention. Avoid being showy and act in secret. People will likely notice anyway. And a great example is a prayer closet, which we often envision as this space, this room inside the house somewhere where people would go and pray. However, what it really is, and my friend Wendy, who was the children and families worker at St. Thomas's, where I did my curacy, she would often do this. What they used to do. So Jewish men, they have their shawls. So their prayer closet, was carried around with them everywhere they went, because they always simply did was put the shawl over their head to create a space where them and God are. So they're locked away from the distractions of the world, and it's just a space where them and God are. And that was them entering their prayer closet. My friend Wendy, she would do this. She'd be sat in the office, and she would have this shawl, and quite often she'd just put it over her head, and you'd know that she was there praying. And you knew not to disturb. Now, it wasn't for show. It was to create this space. It was, I'm entering a space with me and God, not for notice. Jesus' emphasis emphasizes that it isn't just enter your prayer. Go to that space, which is always there, because God is imminent, God is close. But go into that space where you can be just for him. Not stood on a street corner going, oh Lord, aren't I so pious? Blah, blah, blah. Hide away where it's just you and him. And he says it's the same with fasting. Again, like years ago, they would distort their faces and all that sort of thing. And Jesus says, no, don't do that. Don't just look like you would normally look. Present yourself. Don't put on this mask. As a teacher and spiritual leader, I fast. I go through seasons of fasting. There's times where I fast a lot. There's times where I fast a little, surprisingly. And for years and years and years, I wouldn't ever discuss fasting and why I do it, because I'd be like, oh, well, you can trigger people's food issues and so on and so forth and all that. And we're told to do this in secret, so it's not like a thing. But actually, we should be talking about fasting. We should be talking about why we're doing it. I don't do it often enough, fasting. But when I do, I want to be happy to discuss fasting with everyone. Not because I want people to go like, oh gosh, isn't he a really good Christian, ticking that box and blah, blah, I could never do that, blah, blah, blah. But actually I want to talk about the motive behind it. That desire to draw closer to Jesus and how fasting helps us do that. See, fasting needs to be seen so people can understand its purpose and glorify God, not so that they go like, oh, super Christian over there. If that's why you're doing this stuff, then that's the reward you'll get. You'll get the applause. But if your motivation is to draw closer to your Father, to be transformed. See, hopefully when I fast, I'm fasting for far deeper, more meaningful reasons. And I hope that the people around me, that if they see me fasting, if they know that I'm fasting for a reason, they'll be inquisitive. Not just going, oh, well done, good and faithful servant. Because I don't want to be interested in that. I mean, it was hard, actually, because I've said this many, many times, I'm a words of affirmation person. It's scary. I like the applause. And so I have to be careful of my heart. See, if I am convinced and done, then my reward is fulfilled there and then, and it's not going to have a lasting impact because actually it's not transforming me. But if my true reasons for fasting are deeper and connected, and that transformation happens, then I get that reward now because I make that step closer to Jesus, but it adds that compound interest. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so what I think is happening here, if you consider these three things, giving to the poor, prayer, fasting, hopefully you've got the passage there in front of you. Which of the three appears to be the one that Jesus wants to discuss? Prayer. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of talk about prayer, a large section compared to the other two. It truly stands out. Jesus has more to convey and providing, and he provides an example. And this is really a sermon or collection of teachings. And in the other Gospels, the teaching doesn't appear in the Sermon on the Mount, but appears sort of on its own, where the disciples ask him, Rabbi, teach us how to pray. So let's have a look at that in slightly deeper, shall we? I'll read it to you one more time. Jesus says this. He says, This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread and forgive us our debts as we forgive, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Hopefully you're all familiar with the Lord's Prayer. We say it every week. We will say it shortly at the end of our intercessions this morning. It's a common prayer, but it was a common prayer for Jesus and the disciples at the time, and it was called the Amidah. And for years, it was going around. It dates back beyond Jesus, this prayer. And a quick Google search, if you want to Google it later to check my facts, will reveal various different versions of the Amidah, both modern and ancient. And over time, it has evolved into a more in-depth prayer. And the Amidah prayer follows the same format and sections as Jesus' Lord's Prayer, indicating that Jesus isn't quoting a new prayer. He isn't creating a new prayer, something that we have called the Lord's Prayer. It wasn't new. Recent archaeology has uncovered prayers, including the Amidah, predating Jesus. And we know that the Amidah was used when Jesus spoke, as it was recited daily at lunchtime. It was for lunchtime prayer. At noon, they would pray that prayer in the temple and stand in groups of 10 and recite the Amidah together. And you can look at it as well. And if you translate the ancient Hebrew, I was going to have a go at reciting it for you. And I practiced a few times this week, and I thought, I just can't. I can do the odd word and corrupt the odd word, but a whole prayer, I just thought that would be really, really unfair to anybody here watching. Like David, my Old Testament professor at college, would hit me. I think he would come and find me and beat me up. But anyway, it says this. It says, in the English translation, it says this. It says, Our Father, the one who dwells in heaven, may your name be holy. May your kingdom come as we do your will here on earth as it's done in heaven. Give us today the bread of today. And in some versions, we found the line is tagged on, and deliver us from the evil one, cursed be he. And essentially, when his disciples come to him, not in Matthew, but in the other Gospels, and says, Rabbi, teach us how to pray, Jesus responds by saying, you know how to pray. You know how to do this. Why are you asking me? You know how to do this. And he quotes the prayer that they pray at noon every day. I kind of wondered, what time of day did this happen? Did it happen at around about 11 o'clock in the morning? And so come in, he says, well, you know how to pray. We're going to do this shortly. Or even worse, for the disciples, does it happen at 12:15? Where they've stopped and they've all recited this prayer together. And then they say, teach us how to pray. And he says, what do you mean? We've just done it. He says, this is it. And he's not giving them a new prayer, but the same one they know. And he says, you know how to pray. Just pray. There's nothing special. There's no secret. There's no formula. Just pray. And we've been praying for thousands of years in various ways. Just pray. Just talk to him. And I argue that this applies today. We have so messed up prayer and made it be this weird kind of thing. Just pray. You know how to pray. And I believe Jesus' point is to ensure it's authentic, real, and not a performance. However, there is one unique thing in Jesus' prayer. Let's reread the prayer again, and then I'll read the ancient 1st century Amida as well. So, see if you can spot the slight difference. The Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. So here's the 1st century Amida. Our Father, the one who dwells in heaven, may your name be holy. May your kingdom come as we do your will here on earth as it is done in heaven. Give us today the bread of today, and deliver us from the evil one. Cursed be he. They're very similar, aren't they? Almost line for line. Except Jesus adds one line. Did anybody spot what was missing from the Amida? Yeah, forgive us our sins as we have also forgiven those who sinned against us, or our debtors. See, that line is absent in the ancient version. And to this day, we have not found any Amida version, ancient, medieval, or modern, that mentions forgiving our debtors. A few centuries after Jesus, a section discussing God's forgiveness was added. And this is why I emphasize the end of this statement. Jesus adds, forgive us our debts, which eventually appears vaguely in the Amida about God forgiving our debts, but not as we forgive those who debt against us, who sin against us. See, there's no mention of that in the Jewish world because that's not in the Jewish consciousness whatsoever. You just wouldn't ask for it. It's simply not our work to do that. Forgiveness is God's work. I need to focus on God forgiving me. God, would you forgive me? I've messed up. I've done things. Would I live appropriately, and would you forgive me when I don't? Help me to do this. And then forgive me when I mess up. And I glance at Rob, and I think, I hope Rob's forgiven. I hope God forgives Rob as well. I truly do. I hope Rob seeks forgiveness for himself, but forgiving him for the things that he's done wrong against me isn't my job. It's God's role. And if Rob wrongs somebody, that's between him and God. If he wrongs me, it's between him and God. My wish for vengeance is between me and God. And I've kind of got to leave it, I might pray, oh God, smite him. make his chair fall apart. There's never a discussion about my forgiveness of him, of somebody, of one. And one scandal in Jesus' first century teaching that we overlook is his insistence on our invitation to partake in the forgiveness process. It's not just about whether God forgives you, it's about your willingness to engage in forgiveness. For a first century Jew, the idea of forgiving others might be surprising. Would be incredibly shocking. Later in Judaism, it certainly embraces a concept of forgiveness. I'm not implying that it's entirely absent from modern day Judaism. It's not in the slightest little bit, but it's to be honest, it spirals from this teaching. And in Jesus' day, his rabbinical worldview presents a radical concept he repeatedly emphasizes. God forgives sins, and I'm inviting you also into the redemption process. God, Jesus says, is inviting you into the forgiveness process. Forgiveness truly transforms your hearts. I did an assembly on Monday at Christ's College about forgiveness, and my opening slide is, what is the most powerful thing you can do? The most powerful thing you can do is learn to forgive, truly learn to forgive. Jesus continually stresses this. Torah was meant to guide us in changing our hearts and living as a different kind of people. Forgiveness is critical. Now, you might remember me talking about two halves of the Sermon on the Mount. There was a front half that talked about, which was about interpreting Torah, and there was a back half which was about applying that interpretation. And when there's two halves of something, what does it make us think of? Chiasm, hooray! I can see the excitement on your face. We're not going to unpack it properly, but if the Sermon on the Mount is chiastic, some scholars have suggested that the center part of the chiasm is the Lord's Prayer. And the point of that Lord's Prayer being forgiveness. And wouldn't it flow that the same theme that seems to be Jesus' theme on the Sermon on the Mount, the same theme in the Beatitudes about mercy? If you wish to understand what righteousness looks like, show mercy, be forgiving. If you want to be the kind of person who demonstrates the Beatitudes, comprehend what it means to forgive. If we have any doubts about whether this is Jesus' point, what does he say immediately following the prayer? Well, these are the words that come directly after he teaches about prayer. And actually, when you think about it, they're kind of weird. Because he's teaching about prayer, and then he says, for if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. It's weird. It feels out of place. It doesn't to us because we become, nursery rhyme blind to it. We kind of know that this is what Jesus follows up with. But when you take a moment to stand back and go he's talking about prayer, and then suddenly he's emphasizing, and not just, really drilling down on this point about forgiveness. It's because it's a central theme throughout the whole thing, and because forgiveness is so transformative. His teachings emphasize not hating or being angry, but loving your enemies and showing mercy while yearning for righteousness. This focus on how to relate to others, it isn't merely a moral code. It's not about some disconnected walk of righteousness that is just about me and Jesus. This is about other people. If you want to know what it is to follow God, don't put on a show. That's what this is saying. Don't put on a show. Don't be the one who's looking for the applause. Don't be the one who's got their own entrance music. truly get in there and learn how to forgive people, how to love people, how to show mercy to people, how to be about people, how to like, it's that we love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Those two things are so interwoven. It's all about people. It's all about connecting in and drawing close. This is what's going to make the difference. And this is what he's driving to. So often, as the church, we get wrapped up in this whole hypocrisy thing and kind of like, at least we say what we do or do what we say. But actually we're doing it to be actors. And we act like it, and there's a real motive thing. And because we've not allowed ourselves to be transformed by the power of God, and we hold on to stuff, and we hold on to anger and bitterness, and it causes this root to develop in our hearts because we don't allow love to win. So, this is what Jesus is doing. This is what he's teaching. This is what he's calling us into. We get to be transformed by him. That is a reward for now and for the future. That is what's going to bring transformation to yourself and to the world around you. This is what it means to be the light of the world. To not do it for thing, but actually, like your good deeds, people will see it. And when people ask, don't go, I can't really talk about that because I've got to do it in secret. So when people sort of say and we get a bit uncomfortable, like being generous and stuff like that, and if someone ever says to you, let's talk about giving and how much do you, we can get really uncomfortable, can't we? Because it's not very English to talk about money. It's not very English to talk about giving and stuff. And it's not about boasting. It's going like, oh yes, I give £8 million a day. As if we've got that. And I exaggerate for the point, But actually having honest conversations and going like, yeah, actually, this is maybe not putting a figure on it, but going, I give sacrificially. I give to a point where it hurts. Or I'm challenged to give to a point where it hurts, where I'm having to live by faith. Or if someone says to you, well, how do you fast? Oh, I can't talk about that. Ooh. Because then my prayers won't be answered. As if there's some sort of trade going on. If I give up my tea, then I'll get a Ferrari. It's not, that's really superficial, but sometimes we think that's what happens. We have to act and behave in a certain way. Actually, it's not. We get to have these conversations, and it's part of the discipleship process. It's part of saying, look, follow me. I'm trying to work this stuff out. And do you know what? We can even go like, yeah, I really struggle with that because, I get hungry, or I get distracted, or I get X, Y, Z, whatever it is, but we work it out together in a community. Or, maybe actually you're fasting and, you're not very good when you're hungry and you get hangry and, you become a bit grumpy. And so you kind of go, listen, you kind of have to go like, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to respond like that. Or take offense at something somebody else has said because we can't think. And it's all about working this stuff out as a community together and having honest and open conversations and diving that a bit deeper together. But it's not about being an actor or doing it for show or for the applause. Because that's the only reward we get. That's fulfilled. That's done. And all you do is you chase the next thing. I was watching an interesting documentary about Robbie Williams, of Angels fame and Take That and stuff. And he did, if you remember, he did the Nebworth concerts a few years ago. I wouldn't say years, I mean probably about 20, couple of decades, but like literally hundreds of thousands. And he talks about actually that was it took him years to get over that because he was forever chasing the high of so many people, that sea of people who came to see him. You've got the whole Jim Carrey quote, haven't you, about he wishes everybody could be famous to realize that, and to be rich and famous to realize how empty it is. And they kind of throw away in glib comments and all that sort of stuff, but it's true. The applause, the snap, that reaction. But when we do things in secret, it's not about just storing things up into heaven and that delayed gratification, because actually it's not how we're wired to be as people. But it's realizing that God is doing something in our hearts and we are changed and transformed forever, and going, actually, we're one step closer. We're one bit more like Jesus. And that transformation is ongoing and continual. Amen? Amen.